Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting local insight after every game. You can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The Hawks Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. So the Hawks were looking to stop a 4-game losing streak and did, but barely. We'll give you our takes on how the Hawks eked out a 124-122 win against the Grizzlies, and one of the big keys, the turning point to get them a win tonight. Let's get into it. DeShaun, you said that your take was the Hawks need a little more of the same approach.
I think that they did, and I'll tell you what, this was a game in which, especially when they, of course, nobody hopes that they go on a 4-game losing streak, but it seems like when such things happen, and not just because, oh, well, at some point you got to win, and it's easy to say, well, they need that same approach when they get every win, coming off of a losing streak. But this one, while I'm not going to necessarily say it felt different, but to me, it feels like the body language that they approached the game with felt that this win was more than just necessary. Like, I feel like they played as if it was a must win. Maybe not at the beginning of the game per se, getting off into a deficit of being down 12-1 on a run. But after that, I feel like they also played a pretty complete game between quarters. Like, usually there's always one game, or there's always one quarter in a game that's like, how did they manage to do that in that particular quarter? Usually it's the third quarter for whatever reason. But oftentimes it had been the first quarter, and I was a little bit concerned slightly. I knew they'd make a run, but it's just all about how Memphis would respond back to the run that Atlanta would make. And it just seemed to be obviously a tight one all the way down the stretch. So I think it's good that this team had an opportunity to avoid a 5-game losing streak. Tempers were flaring and everything else all across the board. But you have to gut out wins. And with there being so many changes in starting lineups, Onyeka Okongwu going out a little somewhat early in the fourth quarter. I mean, I get it was late, but there was still a lot of time left and a lot of basketball left to be played in a tight game that you had to rely on a guy who hadn't been suiting up in Koloko very much. That, you find ways to gut out and win games against no matter who the team is. So, I think that the approach from the beginning was one that was very good. And I heard Jalen Johnson at the tail end mention how their primary focus was to come out and play with pace. And that was definitely showcased and put on display with a 24-15, I guess just victory for them in the department of fast break points, getting out into transition. They need more of that, moving the ball around to spread the floor.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That was something that we were kind of looking to see more of a couple nights ago, didn't. But tonight, that was one of the areas where the Hawks excelled. Like you said, 24 fast break points to Memphis's 15. So sometimes you got to kind of switch things up and kind of see what the approach is going to be and what's effective for you. And obviously, they were doing a pretty good job of getting going on the break. And something else that I feel was a good approach for them, 17 turnovers. While you wouldn't necessarily want 17 turnovers, you at least want to hold your opponents to 17 points on said turnovers. And the Hawks did, but they, in contrast, were able to score 25 points off 18 turnovers by the Grizzlies. So I definitely think that's another one of those approaches where, hey, if you do get into a situation where you have a higher number of turnovers than you actually want to have, then absolutely you want to offset that by at least forcing about the same amount of turnovers, if not one more, but more importantly, being able to get 8 extra points off that. That's a good look. Now, for me, my take tonight was, guess who's back, DeShaun? You kind of mentioned it. You kind of called him out. And we talked about this a couple nights ago. Not, of course, the game Monday, but game before that. What's going on with Jalen Johnson? You kind of think, is it something that's physical? And you hope not to, because, I wanted him in the bubble wrap from game 1. But is it mental? The thought of maybe taking the mantle, if you will, for lack of a better term, as now the face of the franchise with the departure of Trae Young. Just, kind of wondering what was going on with Jalen Johnson. And sometimes, even though we don't necessarily have an answer to that question, sometimes you just have a couple off games, right? And you just need a reset of a game. And this was a reset game for him. Nearly a triple-double, 32 points on 10 of 21 shooting. We'll take a couple threes from him. 10 of 11 from the free throw line. So again, near perfect there. 15 rebounds, 13 of those defensive. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. And 8 assists and a steal. So that's the kind of Jalen Johnson stat line that we're accustomed to. That's how Jalen Johnson is the guy who's leading the league in total defensive rebounds. That's why
that's right.
Second in defensive rebounds per game, because this is the kind of ball that all around ball that he plays. And where do we always look to see how that impacted the team? Second chance opportunities, right? So only 20 points off only 20 second chance points tonight by the Grizzlies. And when you see how razor sharp and how close this game was, every little rebound, every takeaway of a possession from Memphis mattered. It
definitely did. And I think that it was kind of going back to that approach. A lot of that was kind of ignited by Jalen Johnson. I know it's the FedEx Forum. Kind of seems like he wanted to call him, kind of make it the Fed Up Forum a little bit. And I think that's good for this team. And I feel like, kind of going back to your point about Jalen Johnson and kind of, he's back. If anybody deserved, any one guy on this whole roster deserved to be able to have a game or two to kind of not like their usual selves, it's been Jalen Johnson for sure. And I think it's also good that the Atlanta Hawks have been doing so good. I know I talk about this so often. I just hope some of this energy rubs off when they get back to State Farm Arena. Because now they are 8-4 on the road versus the Western Conference. This is their 25th road game this season. That's the most in the NBA. And I think they have the most road victories even of any team in the NBA. So I think that's good that they continue. Why? I don't know. Maybe they should try, wearing full colored road uniforms when they're playing at home more often or something. I don't know. But I do think that it's good that we can start having conversations again about them, if not nothing else, than for being in the win column, at least for one game.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that. And maybe another reason that the Hawks are in the win column is because, some of the time we question the moves of Quinn Snyder. We'll question the lineups that he puts together. We'll question why certain players get minutes and maybe why other players don't, or why Quinn is being aggressive or not aggressive enough, if you will. But when he does make a move, when he and Ansah Saleh make a move, then you want to kind of talk about it, especially if it looks like the move is actually going to, if the move is going to actually pay dividends. Now, early returns on this one, DeShaun, but this was the first game where you had the opportunity to see Christian Koloko, 11 minutes that he played. So some good backup minutes there behind Mo Gay and Onyeka Okongwu, because of course, as you mentioned, Onyeka fouled out. So you definitely needed to get something from Christian Koloko at the 5. He got 5 points, 1 steal and a block, and a defensive rebound, by the way, again, in just 11 minutes. And then Mo Gay, of course, 7 points in 18 minutes, no blocks, no rebounds, no steals, but one rebound offensively. But I wanted to really just focus on that move because it's a very interesting move that Quinn Snyder made to say, hey, I'm not necessarily getting it out of Mo Gay, but I'm getting a little bit more defensively from Mo than I am from Asa Newell. And Asa, I need you when you're playing the 5, because of course, all of the missed games by Kristaps Porzingis, we need you to really at least bring that offensive firepower, which he was not bringing. So they send Asa down to College Park and bring on Christian Koloko. And I just wanted to get your thoughts before we wrap up on how that particular move went. What were your thoughts on how that maybe impacted the game in some way tonight?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis and not me this time. I think any I don't know if he's been listening to our postcast or what, but any move to try and bring some addition to the center position is obviously a good move. And so while it does look like his numbers aren't nothing to necessarily, write home to mom about or anything else, it was necessary. We can't continue having, Mo Gay at the 5 position and Jalen in many instances being like a point forward, if you will, to some degree. You need a little bit more beef and broccoli up front in the front court. And that's exactly what they got. And somebody to come in and draw some fouls, come in, contribute, bring some production, and just throw, if not nothing else, throw your weight around a little bit and what have you. So I thought that was just a good move to make, just to be able to go out and get somebody that can go out there and put on the uniform and be able to give somebody like a Onyeka Okongwu a little bit of a breather. Because if you think about it, technically, super technically speaking, you're without 3 forwards, 3 front court players. You're without Asa Newell, you're without Kristaps Porzingis and Zachary Reese-Shea, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make, and that's something that we've kind of been whispering, and the whisper has gotten louder and louder and louder.
And the Grizzlies were completely healthy, for crying out loud. Didn't mean to cut you off, but you've got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You were saying the Grizzlies were
the Grizzlies were completely healthy, I think, in this game. So I think that it does have to give a little bit of extra credit.
No, I think that's a great point that you make too, because I can remember I was listening to the radio broadcast. And as they were talking about Jaren Jackson Jr., I said, oh, okay. I said, so we have ourselves a healthy front court for the Memphis Grizzlies. So let's see how this goes. So no, DeShaun, that doesn't go without notice that this patchwork of a front court for the Hawks were still able to help this team get it done in Memphis. Another thing that we did not see on Monday night, it was woeful, but this particular shot, this particular approach, as DeShaun mentioned earlier, was back for the Hawks, and we'll talk about the turning point when we come back. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays, well, they're already feeling different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel. Remember, it's before tip-off. You check that app, see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the cracks. And it works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise. Quo's the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. Quo, no missed calls means no missed customers. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by ZocDoc. Guys, It's 2026. Heck, we're actually almost through the first month of 2026. And those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously. And ZocDoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. So using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. It helps you stay on top of your health before something becomes a bigger problem. You can use it to schedule appointments quickly when you don't want to wait weeks, and the app is quick, clean, and honestly removes all the stress of finding the right doctor. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. DeShaun, the Hawks were at home Monday night, MLK Day. You're thinking they're on their home court. This should be simple for them to get the ball in the basket, right? Not from the perimeter. Over 21 to start Monday's game, but not tonight in Memphis. That was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
No such thing as raining threes on Monday night, at least in the beginning, right? It was very difficult for the Hawks to get the threes to fall in the bucket. And then you get to Memphis tonight, and after those first three possessions, which we'll discuss in a minute, the Hawks actually buried 3 threes in a little over a minute. That's how they took that early lead. Then they end up hitting 6 of 13 in the first 10 plus minutes of the game. Luke Kennard, a big part of why the Hawks were able to hit so well from 3 at 4 of 4 from the perimeter for 10 points early on in the game. And the Hawks end up shooting 20 of 45, 44% from the perimeter. And that was another one of those sneaky good aspects of how the Hawks were able to play tonight and able to eke out a win.
I think that it was really beneficial too that everybody that got action on tonight was able to knock down a 3-point shot. With the exception of one being Dyson Daniels, which I know in time will happen. Don't hold your breath. But hopefully it won't be too much longer before we can kind of get to that point. Yeah. But no, and I think we talked about this maybe about 2 weeks ago. If you look at this lineup, with the exception of Koloko, who we're still trying to familiarize ourselves with his game a little bit. If you look at everybody from top to bottom, all the way from the first guy to the 12th guy on the roster, everybody can shoot and make a 3. I mean, it's not gonna, put you in position where it's like, oh no, don't do that. It doesn't look like Shaquille O'Neal shooting a 3 or anything. Guys can knock down a 3. Some guys are prolific 3-point shooters. Some guys are just budding consistent 3-point shooters. We're seeing some of the benefit that Onyeka Okongwu is getting from some of this. We're seeing the obvious with McCollum and Kennard, Krejci. We know those guys. But I feel like that's kind of the team that they're building to not only be able to be a team that can outscore another team, which ultimately for many, that's how you win a basketball game, to make sure you got more points than the other team, but also to try and find some balance to where they can implement getting some stops as well. Stops, they still need some work on. I'm sure there's going to be some examples in games where the 3-point shooting looks like it needs some work. But it wasn't that long ago, Tenitra, when we were talking about the big 3 things that really just seemed to be the Achilles heel for this team. What were they? I think they were turnovers, free throw percentage, and 3-point shooting. And 3-point shooting seems to be a foregone conclusion of a conversation that we don't really have to have anymore. Hopefully I don't say that too loud and then they shoot very bad. I don't see very many instances where they'll have back-to-back games where they'll just shoot atrociously, similar to how they did in the last one. That 3-point shot, I think, is something that's big for this team that can always, if not anything else, keep them in basketball games with just about anybody.
Yeah, indeed. But one thing that the Hawks have done several games in a row, including tonight, was just allow the other team to get set and get going early. So another game, Another run by the opposing team at the tip. This time it was 11-1 by Memphis before the Hawks could catch their breath. Why do you think the Hawks tend to get off to such slow starts, especially as of late?
I don't know. I think some of it honestly has something to do with, and I think this is where you kind of have to put a little bit of an asterisk, on it, is that they're still trying to figure out lineups. I mean, you don't know sometimes when, Kristaps Porzingis is going to play. I feel like I don't know that until the day of. Zachary Risashe being, in and out of action, obviously due to an injury. Then you make a move for Trae Young, which I feel like that's probably the elephant in the room and probably the most obvious. Then in a situation like this, now you're implementing as of the last game or two. Now you're talking about Corey Kispert being, in the starting lineup. Somebody else was out. Now CJ McCollum had his first start earlier in last week or something like that. So I think some of it is a matter of that. I don't think that's all of it. But I give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes. Yes, they do need to work on starting faster. And I think the other thing is if you notice, there's certain guys that they try and get off to a hot start depending upon who's in the lineup by feeding him first. Zachary Risashe had been that guy for a little while because they want to kind of build his confidence up. Mo Gay, because they know they were going to need his scoring more often depending upon who the opponent is. You're going to have to get him the ball early and often. So I think very much of it does depend upon who's in that starting lineup and how much they're going to need to utilize his offense dependent upon who the matchup is.
Yeah, that's a great call. And I think, too, you got to slow down with the turnovers. When you start the game, 3 turnovers on your first 3 possessions, you kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball as well. So hopefully we'll see a reset in that regard as the Hawks return home to host the Phoenix Suns Friday. Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.